Welcome to Bigfoot
and the Bunny.
This is a couple's journey into the mysterious,
the unknown, and the paranormal.
I'm your host, Chris Carr.
And I'm your host, Kristen Johnson.
Together we are Bigfoot and the Bunny.
Welcome to Bigfoot and the Bunny. I am your host, Chris Carr.
And I am your host, Kristen Johnson, the hostess with the mostest.
The hostess with definitely the mostest. I love this woman.
Oh, thank you. I love you too. And guess what? Happy birthday to you. It's Chris's birthday today.
I'm trying to forget. Come on now.
Come on. Your daughter.
I'm too old for this
Logan.
stuff. And I got this thing hanging off my lip over here. I've been growing. It looks like I've been eating steel wool or something. I don't know.
Listen, Lori Ann just said something really funny about that. So
what did we call it?
A flavor saver. She did. You called it that before, but she said it and made me laugh.
I think we call it a soul patch.
Yeah.
I know my sister-in-law, who I hadn't seen in I don't know how long, at Thanksgiving. The first thing she said to me is like, "Hello, 1995."
She did. I loved it. It was so funny.
And I did have one back in those days as well. Anyways, thank you for hanging out with us. I know we got a late start tonight, a little family medical emergency thing.
Kind of had an emergency.
A little bit, but we're getting through everything. Everything's all right. And here we are. You know, happy Saturday.
Happy Saturday.
I see a lot of our good friends out here. Irene Takura, Anne-Marie Young.
Hi, Anne.
Really appreciate it. Hello, 1995. Jack Kilowatt says, "Love it."
Hi, Jack.
That's right.
Hi, Irene.
It is a little that. I know.
Oh, Irene. I like it.
Freaking peaked in the 90s.
Listen, I like it, and I'm not one for facial hair. I don't like facial hair.
We were growing up, everybody used to go, "Oh, you should have seen the 60s," you know. But for us, I think it was probably the 90s.
The 90s, absolutely.
You know, it's Nathaniel J. Gillis.
You are early too, my friend. I love you.
My brother from another mother.
Joshua Dixon.
Joshua.
Thank you, Joshua, for all the love.
Thank you. We appreciate it. So we have an amazing show. You guys are really going to like this. It's a guest we've had on before. We're going to focus on a specific book. And before we get into all that stuff, I just want to say it's really appropriate. We have a friend that's really going through a tough time. And I'm not going to get into personal stuff, but and I cannot imagine. I mean, our problems seem minute compared to the day he's having, and we hope somehow in this you find some comfort. And you know you are if you listen to this. You know you are. Our guest is the author of Omnipresent, as well as, oh my gosh, let me click the button here. Geez, what happened? I lost my page. What Happens Next? Omnipresent, What Happens Next? And her newest book is called The Colors of Heaven. So let's bring her right on. Her name is Lynn Monet.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Lynn's Kitchen.
What's cooking?
Yeah, what's cooking? Good looking.
I have to have my foot up on a chair because I had my cast taken off. So it's just more convenient to sit in here, you know, so I can have my thing on the table, my foot up on my chair. So, well, hello, Anne. Hello, everybody.
Hey, Carol.
Hi, Carol. I'm not able to see all of the chat, so if I missed acknowledging anybody, I send hearts to everybody. Thank you so much. Please don't forget to click the like button and subscribe.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And
yes,
I know you're going to tell us some pretty mind-blowing stuff. And basically what happens when we die, which is a question everybody wants to know. Before we get started, I would just want to ask, we know you have abilities. Is that how you came upon this knowledge?
Yes, actually, as many of you may already know, and those that don't, I did grow up in a haunted house. I did start seeing things when I was very, very little. There were some things that my brother and I actually saw together at the same time that were very profound. and the house that we lived in was 3 short blocks behind a hospital that had a nursing home connected to it. So we would see people in patient gowns walking through, and with that, then moving forward, and if I may just explain that a little bit further, there was a very, very profound moment for me as a child that I remember. My brother and I were both in my parents' master bedroom. And of course, being 5, I was in my mother's jewelry box. And I was decorating myself. And my brother was on the floor playing with his Matchbox or Hot Wheel cars, whatever they were. And I turned to show him how glamorous I've made myself look, dripping in my mother's rhinestone jewelry. And he was fixated on the corner of the room. And so I turned to look and see what he was looking at. And there was like this misting in the wall in the corner. And in that misting stepped in my brother's very best friend, John. And behind John stepped in his mother, father, and brother. And they were all just kind of floating there in that mist, smiling at us. So my brother gets up, runs out of one door. I run out of the other. We're calling for my mom. And my brother, of course, finds her first. And he's like, Mom, John's in the bedroom. And she's like, in the bedroom? I didn't even hear anybody knock. And she says, and who let them in my bedroom? So of course she's like rushing into the bedroom to get these people out of her bedroom. And of course, when they got in there, there was nothing there. So my brother got in trouble for it. And of course I didn't open my mouth because I didn't want to get in trouble too. But the very next day was the beginning week after spring break. And my brother, he was in 2nd grade. I was in kindergarten. I was 5, he was 7. So he was on the bus, and normally he would sit with his friend John, but John wasn't on the bus this day. So he gets to class, and his desk is connected to John's. They were best buddies, and of course, John's not in class either. So after the Pledge of Allegiance was stated, the teacher stood up in front of the class and stated that John would no longer be coming to class because he and his entire family perished in an accident coming back from Disney World or someplace in Florida that they had gone to. So when my brother got home, my mother, of course, had already heard the news and didn't really know what to make of it. So she was just more kind of, quiet about it. But as time went on, when I was about 10 years old, I'd been born and raised Presbyterian, and this is just kind of like a little brief bio thing. And my mother took a jaunt with the Jehovah's Witnesses. Well, that's a book in itself, by the way, but I'm not going there.
I bet.
Yeah. So being 10 years old and having the ability to have second sight and seeing things, I was brought in front of the elders of the church, and the elders are similar to like a priest or a minister or pastor, somebody that makes the decisions in the church. And I'm standing at 10 years old in this room, scared to death. All of these men are looking at me, telling me that I'm possessed, telling me that what I'm seeing is demons, telling me that I'm going to die in Armageddon, and that all of these horrible, even things that I saw that were comforting, like my great grandmother that I recognized, they were all demons. So I became so afraid of my gifts that even though I still continued to see things, I would run out of the room just as fast as anybody else. Oh my God, that's a demon, So I was running too. But when it came,
that's understandable. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Natural gift.
Yeah. So I when I came forward, of course, had children, and I had purchased that house that I wrote the first book about that was so badly haunted that I never was able to move in.
Omnipresent.
Exactly. And that book, that whole situation put me into connection with other people of like mind. And there were people that were seeing things in that house the same time I was. So that validated me and helped me to be able to nurture my gifts and kind of bring them back. So I then wrote the second book, which was more related to my nursing, as well as I did get a hold of the people that I purchased the house from, and the story that they told me about their children being attacked and things like that was, again, a story in itself. But with my nursing, I've been a nurse for over 30 years, 37 years. And it just, 17 of that being in end of life care, I've seen a lot of people pass away. And I've also, just with that second book, I was able to go into facilities that of psychiatric wards during, I had gone back to school to further my degree, and I had to do a rotation through the psychiatric wards, and I was able to see archon attachments on people, and people with addictions, people that were misdiagnosed with schizophrenia, because I could see the attachments on their back. So I wrote about that in the second book. The third book was, the primary thing was when my mother passed away. My mother had cancer for a year, and I was actually in the room with her when she passed away, and I actually got to see her leave her body. So I'll be happy to share that with you if you'd like me to.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, we
please
love
do.
that story.
I'd like to know. We'd like to know, like, how you came upon it, because it's pretty profound, and I know we've talked offline about some of the stuff. So I think it's a lot, and people will probably ask, like, well, how do you know this? So tell.
Well, I've seen probably 100 people pass away in my profession, especially since most of it's been end of life. I also do some. I'm considered a death doula, which is a person that also assists with people when they're crossing. So I've seen some consistencies with people. One of the things is that most people, when their time is coming close to pass, they know it, and they may make comments to, like, if ever something happens to me, will you make sure that you take care of my cat, or or people start talking about seeing parents and loved ones. People, a lot of times when they're actively passing, they will leave their body before the body actually stops breathing. So it's just a body there. They're actually standing next to you in the room. And then there are other people that prefer to stay in body until the very, very last minute. My mother chose to stay in body until the very last minute. So on the day that my mom, the day before, my mother was going around the facility that she lived in, and she was telling people goodbye. She even came across one lady and told her that she would take care of her dog. Her dog had just been put down 3 days earlier, that she would take care of her dog for her until she could cross over herself someday. So, and she was telling people that she was going home to heaven, and that, she was saying goodbye. And I just want to say this is a thing in the book for those of you who are star seeds. There is an element in the book that combines the two. Everybody's right here. So, stay with me, because there's some talk about angels, but there's some talk about some other spirits too, as well, that help come in and collect people, depending on who you are. So everybody's right. Yeah,
Hey,
everybody's right.
Archons, which to you are something you see almost like a backpack demon.
Yes.
It's kind of like creature. And I hate to use that D word, but you know what I mean. It's just a sort of this creature attached to people on their back, and it's dragging them down. Let me ask you this: why do bad things happen to good people? To quote the book title.
A lot of times people that are empaths or sensitives, those of us, like all of us with our special gifts, we have a tendency to even have a harder time than people that do not have the gifts, because a lot of times the darkness likes to dub out the light. So it kind of creates more problems that way. In the case of the archons and the attachments, archons specifically, I've seen on people with addiction. They look like spiders, crabs, sometimes reptile, like lizard-like. The thing that's distinct about them is that they have a head that is much smaller in comparison to their body, kind of like the opposite of a baby that's got a big head, little body. They have bigger body, little head. They do attach the hips and the shoulders. I have seen one in front one time, but their heads have this fin type thing on the back of their head that when they turn their face, it kind of flops over if they're like up on a ceiling or something. And I'm saying on a ceiling because a lot of times when people do come to terms with their addictions, the archon will detach, but it never leaves. It always is tempting. And that's why they have to constantly maintain, their therapy, maintain their support system with that, because that archon is waiting for any opportunity to reattach. They feed off of the chaos that they create for the person with the addiction and the entire family, and the rippling effect that is created with that, the sadness and the money loss and all of the chaos that happens with that sort of thing. So, you can't tell kids enough to stay away from anything that's addictive, they don't listen, but once they get one, it stays with them for their lifetime.
Yeah.
It doesn't stay on them, but it will stay with them. It constantly is waiting for that opportunity to reattach.
It seems so devious, and it makes so much sense in the behaviors that follow addiction.
Yes, it makes it hard.
Getting back to, bad things happening to good people. So many things in our life itself, it seems a bit tragic, right? I mean, I think part of that is like knowing the difference between what's good and what's bad. But then again, it seems really unfair at times. Do you feel like people make a choice before they're born as to what their life is going to be and know ahead of time, even though they don't know in their conscious life? Like, all right, I'm going to pass at 30 and, well, that's great, but I'm with my star family. That kind of
I believe that we have a lot of choices. When my mother crossed over, and she comes back frequently, and she has shared some things with me. She talked about the afterlife review that you do go through, where you are put in the shoes of people that you've heard, as well as you get to have the feel good moments for the things that you did good. But she talks about specifically this room that is similar to a hallway, and it almost has cubbies on each side with veils almost over some of them, and some of them are open. And she made mention that the ones with the veils over them are opportunities that we've missed. So there is a basic guideline, but there are ways to get to that goal, because we're all here to learn. Earth is like the hardest planet in out of every solar system that there is. This is the one that is the hardest. It's the worst. So we are given options to have things be made easier or harder, depending on whether we make the choice to take those opportunities. And when we don't, we do get to see the ones that we missed. And it's a kind of an oh darn moment. Well, if I had known that, I would have taken a left instead of a right. So it is kind of a combination of everything. Like, there is a blueprint. Everybody has a purpose for coming here. This is a school in itself. We do have all kinds of people here from heaven, from other solar systems, things like that. So, but we all do have a purpose here that way.
Well, that's fantastic. So what do you think happens? Tell us about Colors of Heaven.
Please.
What it means to people, because this is big. It's very profound.
If you'd like, I'll tell you about my mom's crossing. There was also a pact that my mother and I made before she crossed over, and also talking about some of the things that have consistently happened with people prior to death. But I'd like to start with my mom's crossing first, because that's a lot of people, they may not be able to stay up as late, or, this is kind of like the key piece. When my mother was actively passing, as I made mention, she decided to stay embodied until the very last minute. And the reason why I know this is because even though she was no longer verbal, she could no longer open her eyes, she was moving her eyebrows and mouthing words appropriately. People would come into the room and they'd say, "Hi, Phyllis," and she'd go in response. And again, it was appropriate. So as I'm sitting there with her, I'm noticing that there's misting all from wall to wall, ceiling to floor on the other side of her bed. And I'm watching, and I'm seeing movement on the other side. I'm sometimes seeing a pant leg stick out, or a shoulder. And yes, they do show up in clothes. Nobody wants to see mom naked, so that would be kind of shocking. Usually they show up in either what they've died in, what they were buried in, or what you remember them in most. And I say died in, when they show up in clothes that they've died in, they're usually souls that have chosen not to cross over. So I consider those not spirits, but ghosts. Even there is a difference between spirits and ghosts. Spirits have crossed over, they come back and forth. At least my definition is ghosts are kind of more earthbound. So they do show up in what they've died in or buried in. Mm-hmm. Same as here, the way that we remember them last. So I'm watching this movement, and all of a sudden, up towards the head of my bed, at my mother's bed, it starts to efface and thin. And I saw my mother's mother, my grandmother, step in, and she looked the exact same as I remembered her. She had the little tight 80s curly perm, and she even presented with her glasses on, and she had a leisure suit that she had made for herself. And she walked over to the bed and she started stroking the inside of my mother's forearm, and she would lean forward to my mother and say something in her ear, and my mother would respond with the mouthing and the moving of her eyebrows as my grandmother's spirit would pull away. And then she leaned forward again. This happened 3 times. And from behind my grandmother, I see this frantic wave. And it was my beautiful sister. I had my youngest sister, Robin, was murdered by a jealous boyfriend when she was 20, just had barely turned 20.
Horrible story. Yes.
And she came, she actually, I could smell her perfume. Her perfume just filled the room. She wore Latisse back in the 80s. It wasn't a common perfume. And she came around the misting and came over and actually embraced me. I could smell her. I could feel her hair falling across. She had long, beautiful hair falling across my face. And then she went back around. I could just feel her. But when she went back around, that whole wall had effaced. Everything was open. There were hundreds of people in there. And the people, they had all come to help my mother cross over. And I remember saying to my mom, I said, Mom, I kissed her cheek. I said, Mom, Robin and Grandma are here to help you cross over. It's time to go. And she literally took her last breath within about 10 or 15 minutes after that. But in the meantime, I'm watching the other side. I'm looking into this beautiful, the light over there is not a light source. It's like it emits from within the atmosphere itself, if that even makes sense. There was this table with a flowing cloth on it. It was like they were preparing for a reception or some kind of reunion. I remember thinking that there was no food on the table, which my mom explained at another time later after she passed, which I'll share with you before this is over. But so I'm looking, and there are colors on the other side that we do not have, that you would have need a whole nother color wheel for. But all of a sudden I'm watching, and I notice this whole group of spirits. They're huddling like in a football hold up near the head of my mother's bed, and they're layered almost like petals on a flower, like a peony flower. And when they open up inside, my mother is standing there. It was like they were huddling around her to stabilize her spiritual feet. And then and I'm looking, at her. I'm watching the people that were coming up and greeting her. Some of them I recognized from this lifetime, like some uncles that had passed away, my great-grandmother, my grandmother, my sister. A lot of the people I didn't recognize, but my mother did, that were coming up and saying hello to her. She was smiling from ear to ear. And that's another thing too. The feeling that comes from that other side, there are no words to describe it. And there's no feeling that can touch it in our earthly terms. And I am sitting there grinning from ear to ear as well. I wanted to be a part of that, even in that moment. I wanted to go for the day and come back because it was this magnificent reception. So I look over and I notice that my mom has stopped breathing. And of course, I'm thinking to myself, well, I'm sitting here. I'm grinning from ear to ear. If the nurse were to walk in, my mother's just died, and I'm sitting here smiling. You can't help it with that kind of, and plus she's not dead to me because I can see her standing right there. So greeting people and very happy and not suffering from her cancer anymore. So I called the nurse to have her come in. I didn't want her to think I put a pillow over my mother's head or something, because smiling is not a normal response when somebody's just passed away.
Right.
So the nurse came in and walked through the festivities. All the festivities were going on the side of the room that the door was, and she came in and she walked through all of them. They didn't seem to mind, and she pronounced that my mother had passed away. And I asked her if I could stay in the room because I wanted to watch. So I'm watching all of this, and the room is starting to thin out as the people have come to greet her. They kind of go off, and the room thinned out to like maybe 5 spirits, and my grandmother and my sister who were helping my mother cross over. And these beings that were there, one of them looked very, very angelic, but there was another one that was very, very tall, like 7 or 8 feet tall, because its head was like skimming almost onto the ceiling. This magnificent being that had white hair, looked to be the level of my light is blinking, looked to be the level of an angel, but with no
Seen it
wings.
twice do that. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think my mom's here cheering me on. But anyway, so, and I say that because the spirit was not a spirit that I would identify from like an earthly kind of thing. It seemed to be a little bit more of a, I mean, we have so many solar systems with similar planets, even like here. There are people, that cross over, go cross and pass away on those too. So you've got to know that there's not just human beings from Earth up there. There are other beings up on the other side as well. So, I'm watching this and the windows behind me, and they're kind of coming and filing out on my left-hand side, going towards the window. And again, I don't know if the cracking the window thing, I've heard it before. It might have just been a coincidence and they were going out that way anyway, whether there had been windows or not, but they did file out. And I could see my mother approaching. She was still in her patient gown. The way that I see spirits is I can see them as plain as I can see you in my peripheral vision. I can tell you what they have on. As they get closer, sometimes I can see a lower half or like a side or an upper, usually not the upper half, but there's this waffling to the air like gas fumes or a hot vapors coming off of a hot road. It has that waffling in the air. So as they approached, I recognized my mother's beautiful. She had very beautiful legs, and I recognized my mother's legs. And they passed me, and all of them made contact with the top of my head, including these beautiful beings. And it was kind of tingly. And they went ahead and they left. So getting to see that and getting to be a part of that really, really brought things home for me. And I wanted to be able to share with other people. I'm hoping that this book brings a lot of comfort to people who have lost someone, perhaps someone who has terminal illness, to help they take the stigma of death and dying away. And I've got so many stories from the hospital and things, working as a nurse, of things that occurred that I can share with you if you'd like.
We would love that.
Yes,
I think
please.
it's important, especially this time of year. I mean, there are certainly instances, as we've talked about through the day, right, where like, oh my gosh, life can just throw these curveballs that seem to make no sense, and it's so unfair. From a person's point of view, you wonder, like, is this a predetermined thing?
Yeah.
Do you choose it? Or what is the point of going through that pain? But then again, what would you know to be good, if you didn't have some pain as well? And I don't know if there's some crazy balance out there, but whatever insight you can give us, because it sounds very similar to near-death experiencers. We've talked to NDEs who have explained a thing with like seeing colors that didn't make any sense. They just didn't have a word for it.
Right. Right.
They weren't of our world.
I have a thing about our eyes. Excuse me. I've talked about this before. So we see like 33%, now 35%, whatever, of colors.
Light spectrum.
The light, spectrum and stuff. Can you imagine if maybe we saw 37%? And I think that's what you're kind of going for and what you're talking about, because we would never have the definition, of those colors. I mean, it was like that a long time ago as well.
Yeah.
Was it Greek? Like thousands of years ago, they said that.
Well, yeah, they said the Greeks didn't have a
blue,
a name for the color blue.
Yes.
So they considered it a shade of black. And because of that, they couldn't easily recognize the color blue. And the studies have shown, science has shown,
and it
in
wasn't
recent
just
times,
Greek,
because there are different tribes and things around the world that don't have names, and there's a correlation that the brain makes that's deeper than just simply a label, because of the fact that you've given it some sort of a name or a label. You can recognize it easier. So there are some tribes that, for instance, have different names for shades of green that we don't have here.
Right.
And even though they're very close in the light spectrum, they can recognize them much quicker. But what fascinates me with what you're telling us and what NDEs have told us is that there are just colors that don't even exist in the spectrum.
Yeah, they
just
don't.
aren't part of this world. They're kind of otherworldly.
Right.
Yeah, and the thing about the colors over there too is they're not just colors. They are living colors. you connect with them and can almost feel the vibration come through them like they're alive, if that even makes sense.
Well, Living
Even
Color
connecting it from the
goes back to the Soul Patch, and it's 1995 again. And,
that's a flavor
I
saver.
love the band
Anyway.
and the skit, show.
Come on.
The flavor saver.
Oh,
In Living Color.
I don't.
A lot of times things there are some things that we think of like, why me, why is this happening, and a lot of times those bumps and grinds kind of get you back on your path. And even getting on the interstate and you're late for work and you've got this little old lady putting along in her car and you're verbally assaulting her while you're behind your wheel because they won't move. You won't realize until you cross over and you're brought back to that moment, and you will be brought back to that moment, that woman saved your life, because 5 minutes down the road, if you had been on time, you could have been in a horrible accident. So there's always a reason for things, even that seem horrible sometimes. And usually things and also I wanted to mention too, because you were talking about the eyes. When people pass away, they still have all of their senses. They're able to see, they're able to hear. According to my mother, who I asked about eating on the other side because I was curious, I said to her one day, I said, Mom, don't you ever miss the taste of your potato salad or the brownies that you used to make, or barbecued ribs? And she's like, she comes through like a megaphone and she says, well, we don't eat here. I said, yeah, I know that. And she says, everything we do is through thought. If we want to go somewhere, we think of it and we just go. If we want to be with someone, we think of them and we're there. She said, and when it comes to food and eating, she said, if there's something from our earthly life that we, or any place that we've ever been, that we want to experience, all we have to do is think of it. She said, so like, for instance, if I want to have potato salad, I think of it, and the sensation and the flavor of it comes to me as if I'm eating it. And I thought that was wonderful. I thought, well, wow, wouldn't that be great if we had that here? You can eat as much as you want and not have the calories. So, she kind of shared that with me, as far as the way that things kind of work over there. But yeah, I've got so many, oh my gosh, so many stories working as a nurse.
Comment, and I think this applies to that, from George and Dexler says, my mother also died from cancer. After diagnosis, she was given 2 weeks, one in the hospital and the last at home. The last day, she was really quiet, but about an hour before dying, she sat up in bed. And I've heard stories like this.
Yes.
Just
Yes.
before.
But I've actually seen that. I'm sure you have too, Lori, a lot of times.
It's called rallying.
Yes.
Yes.
Just before.
Yes, that does happen. And also a lot of times they'll start, when they are going through that process of rallying, a lot of times when you come in the room, their eyes are kind of glazed over, their toes are flaccid. And then all of a sudden, when they come back in, the body kind of jumps, their eyes brighten, like the lights are all of a sudden on, and their toes will perk. And then a lot of times they'll start talking about seeing deceased loved ones. They'll talk about babies that haven't come in yet. They'll talk about a lot of things that way. And it's unfortunate because a lot of times people are uncomfortable when the loved one that's transitioning starts talking about a dead person in the room. But this is all part of it. And when people are grieving, they miss a very, very beautiful moment of when they can also communicate with the other side themselves. And they don't realize it. There's a story in particularly about a patient that I had that was blind. I call her Edna in my book. She was totally blind. She hadn't seen anything for 10 years, not shadows, not anything. So I'm at the nurse's station, and her son and daughter come to my nurse's station, and they say, Mom's talking to people in the room that aren't there. I'm like, okay. I'm like, well, let me come down with you and see if I can get something for your mama to make her more comfortable. And when I walk in the room, Edna is laying partially, they've got her slanted to help her breathe better. And she's reaching up into the sky as if somebody's handing her something very delicate, like a snowflake or something. And she's smiling from ear to ear. And I said to her, I said, Edna, said, who's here? And she says, George. And her daughter had to sit down because she almost passed out. She said, well, George is my father. And my father's been, dead for X amount of years. And then all of a sudden Edna pipes up and she says, and he's glad you're taking good care of Pixie. Well, Pixie was her poodle. And when her husband passed away, when Edna's husband passed away, the son had to take possession of the poodle because Edna couldn't care for the dog being blind. And so the son speaks up and he says, Pixie, I have Pixie. Pixie's now an old dog, like 14 years old, but still very much alive. And he said, do you think that my mom's hallucinating? Because the information that she was stating was correct. And a lot of things too is people, when they start talking about deceased loved ones, they're not talking about people that other family members don't know. It is other people that they know of. So so I asked Edna, I said, well, I said, I don't know what your belief system is. I'm not trying to do anything to change your beliefs. However, spirits do come in to help collect their family members and help them cross over while they're going through these rallying times and experiencing both dimensions, kind of testing the water, so to speak. I said, let me try something. And I said, Edna, can I ask George a question? And she nodded yes. And I said, what color is your son's shirt? And she said, yellow. Now, keep in mind, this woman's totally blind. And the son in that moment had this profound moment because he's like, hi, Dad. He got it that his father was actually in the room because there's no way that Edna could have known what color shirt he had on. And he had on a pastel yellow Ralph Lauren polo shirt. And I mean, I have so many stories like that again and again and again of people talking about loved ones in the room. I could go on with many, many stories. I've got another one with a lady named Abigail, if you want me to continue.
I love the name Abigail. So yeah, please.
Okay. Abigail came into our facility. We had 3 levels of care. We had the independent, assisted living, and skilled. I worked in the skilled unit. Abigail and her husband came to the facility that I was working in because her husband's health had started to decline and she couldn't take care of him herself anymore. And it just so happened that Abigail fell and fractured her hip and ended up on my unit. So we got to know each other because she was there for several weeks and we built up a rapport. And there was one day in particular that I came in and Abigail was upset. And I came in and she said to me, she said, Lynn, she said, do you think I'm crazy? And of course I'm teasing her a little bit because we had that rapport and I'm like, define crazy. And she says, no, I mean like crazy. And I'm like, well, no, why would you, even say something like that? And she said, well, I see my parents. She said, I know that my parents have died over, 20 years ago, both of them, and, or one, however amount of years it was, one was 20. And she said, but I see them and it makes me happy. And she said, and now they're getting ready to put me on medication for hallucinations because I'm seeing my parents. And I told her, I said, well, it just so happens that today in report, I was told that tomorrow morning you're going to be discharged back to your apartment. I said, and as your advocate, you can refuse. You can refuse. If you are of sound mind, you can refuse to take any new medications if you don't want them. And she, of course, was happy with that. The next day she went back. She went back to her apartment, and about 7 months later, her health has drastically declined, and she comes back onto my unit. And this time she's also talking about seeing a woman and a little girl. And she was actually sneaking cookies and desserts from the dining room back to her room to give to the little girl. And of course, this was creating a bug problem. So we had to stop her from doing that. But there was normally I worked a bailer shift on the weekends. I worked midnight so I could be a soccer mom on Saturday morning and have Monday through Friday off as a single mom with my kids and work the long hours on the weekends. But I had volunteered to do a day shift for a friend of mine who needed the day off. So I'm working this day shift. The residents are all back in their rooms after lunch, and I'm getting ready to go down the hallway to do my treatments. And as I'm passing Abigail's room, I see this woman and this little girl standing in front of her in Abigail's room. And I remember thinking to myself, oh, wow, great. Abigail's, she's got guests today coming to visit. And the way that Abigail was sitting is in the room, there was this large picture window with this air conditioner underneath, and like the American hotels have. And I say that because I'm sure we have some listeners that are from outside of the country. And Abigail was in a recliner off to the side, and she was leaning forward with this piece of yellow butterscotch wrapped candy. And anybody else that would have passed by, it would have looked like she was trying to feed the air conditioner, but she was offering it to the little girl in front of her. No. So I pass the door. I take about 3 steps. I'm like, wait a minute. I don't remember those people signing in at the desk. And we have to have a head count in the building just in case there's an emergency. And the fire department needs to know how many people to get out. So I backed up. I knock on her door frame. She invites me in. And when I walk in the little hallway, there's nobody there but her. But I can see the waffling in the air right next to me. And all of a sudden, Abigail says to me, she says, I want you to meet my friends. Isn't the little girl beautiful? And I said, yes, she is. And Abigail just flings forward in her chair and she looks and she says, can you see them? And I said, yes. And she said, don't tell anybody. She said, because they'll put you on medication and think that you're nuts or crazy or whatever it was she said. And so here this woman now was being heavily medicated for hallucinations. She was still seeing her parents. She was still seeing other spirits that were coming over to visit her, even though she was heavily medicated, and she had the wherewithal to understand that. So as about another month or so passed and she was in an active decline and I was working the night shift, I came into her room. She was in that rallying stage. I walked in, I patted her arm and I said to her, I said, hi, it's Lynn, Abigail, I'm here to check your blood pressure. And her eyes kind of brighten, her toes perk. And she said, I'm so glad I get to see you one more time. I'm going home tomorrow with my parents. They're going to come and get me and they're going to take me home. And I knew what that meant. So I said to her, I said, oh, you precious lady, thank you so much for letting me be part of your healthcare team. And she interrupts me and she says, and I want to tell you something. And I cried. And to this day, this makes me cry. She said, you're very much loved on the other side. And you need to continue doing what you're doing. And it makes me cry even just talking about this. And I said to her, I kissed her cheek and I said, you precious lady, we are going to see each other again. And she said, oh, we most certainly will see each other again. And I then, left her room. That was the last time that she was coherent. She was just she didn't rally anymore after that. She wasn't coherent, wasn't verbalizing. So the next night I was off, and at around 10:30, I feel her saying, I made it home. And sure enough, she had crossed over at around 10:30 that night and went home with her parents. So, and there are so many other stories of people that have been close, even with Alzheimer's. I had a lady also in there, I'm going to call her Shirley if you'd like to hear this one. It's not a long story, but she had Alzheimer's. I had been at the facility at that point for 7 years. And I remembered when Shirley was up walking around and talking. And for the 3 years from the point of that day, she hadn't spoken one word, nothing. She was in a wheelchair, wheeling herself around the hallway, scooting, and she came and she stopped in front of the nurse's station. So I'm collecting my charts, I'm getting things ready to do my med pass and go down the hallway, and all of a sudden I hear a woman's voice screaming, take me home, please, please take me home. Well, I turn around, I come out, I'm looking down the hallway, and we have just down the hallway to my right, the first door on the right also, a woman was actively passing. So I look, there's Abigail, there's Shirley sitting there in front of the nurse's station, just sitting there, and I'm looking down the hallway to see who it is that's calling. And they had stopped. So I thought, well, okay, well, whoever it is, one of the CNAs must have gotten it. So I turn around and I go back to head towards the back. And again, all of a sudden I hear, take me home, please, please take me home. And I turn around and it's Shirley. And I'm shocked because I haven't heard this woman's voice in 3 years. So I walked over to her and I stroked her arm and I said, Miss Shirley, who is it that you want to have take you home? And she pointed down the hallway in the direction of the lady that was actively passing. And she said, look at the angels. Aren't they beautiful? And then she continued to call out, please, please take me home. Please take me home. So I looked down the hallway and at first I didn't see anything, but then I looked again in a different way, and you could see this woman, the woman that was actively transitioning. The angels and the people were literally bulging through the wall into the hallway, and this is what Shirley was seeing. And then Shirley herself passed away about 4 months later. After that, so she was close to her time. When we come in as children, we don't have certain filters in place for discernment and things like that, and they kind of thicken over time. But when you get closer to your time to pass, a lot of those filters also start to efface, and you start being able to see into the other side.
I find that interesting and true. And someone close to you is passing, it's almost like they come in. And
Yes.
I've said that before, and maybe to you, in talking to you in the past. I
Yes.
noticed that when my father passed earlier in the year. There's some really interesting comments out here I wanted to get to. Jack Kilowatt says, life is perfect. There are no accidents. You are exactly where you were supposed to be, which kind of speaks to that predeterminism that I mentioned earlier. It's almost like we make these choices and know ahead of time.
That's true. Mm-hmm.
You know, all right, I'm not going to see my full lifespan, but I'm going to have a great time while I'm here. Linda Judd said, this reminds me of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, champion for hospice. And what's more beautiful than hospice? Echo Leaf says, the Amish near us placed the recently deceased on an ice block on their kitchen table for 3 days. They call it, quote unquote, the wake. They really wait to see if they will wake up. Very special folk. I have to imagine that is
I've heard about this before.
Older practice, right? And it's a little bit like
especially
when they take the tubes, right? And they buried people for a time, I guess in the 1800s, right? Where they weren't sure if they were dead or might come back.
Yes.
When they put an air tube into the grave where they were buried.
They would ring bells. If that's where they would have bells as well with the string that goes down into the coffin.
Saved by the bell.
Saved by the bell.
And as we all know, Danny and Brinkley was taken down to the morgue, and they were getting ready to put him in the freezer when he was trying to get their attention to that he had come back to life. So you never know. They may have somebody that occasionally sits up. Sometimes it's gas and body fluids, and other times it might be, somebody
coming out of a coma, something, right?
Yes.
Carol says, when my brother was in hospice a few years ago, he was saying that his son, who had transitioned 14 years before him, was there. My brother was saying his son was there the first day he arrived at hospice, and they were going to go fishing. It was such a peaceful feeling, so much love surrounding all of us.
Isn't that beautiful? And the thing is when people are actively transitioning, talking about that opportunity for you to communicate with the other side, how many times have you heard somebody say, I wish that I could just tell them that I love them one more time, or tell them that I'm sorry, or even ask somebody where, something was placed, where the clock is or whatever. This is your time. While the transitioning person is actively transitioning, their receptors for the telepathy open so that they can hear the spirits that are coming in to collect them, the same as they can hear the speaking in the room by the people that are embodied, and they can answer for you. Now, the spirit that you have the question for does need to be in the room, and it needs to be one question at a time. A lot of times, if someone is severely grieving in the room, these spirits, because their vibration is so high, sometimes they increase things, good or bad, good or negative for that matter, make them more sorrowful or more happy. So sometimes they will stand back or create a situation where maybe another human will come in and kind of move the person grieving off to the side so that they can come in and do what they need to do. I'm trying to see some of the comments here.
It was a comment from Echo that said maybe whoever's flickering her lights can turn the water on.
They probably can.
Your light.
Your faucet.
We're pointing to him now every time it happens, Chris and I. Your lights keep flickering. It's amazing.
It's funny.
Yeah.
When you mentioned it might have been your mother, and when you were talking about your mother, and I sound like Sigmund Freud now. Tell me about it. They were flickering a lot, so that was kind of interesting.
Yes.
Yeah, I even asked like a bunch of people in like different pages. I'm like, do you guys see Lynn's lights flickering? Anyone?
There's a whole lot of comments out there tonight, guys, and we really appreciate it. If we don't get to all your questions, know that we will at least read them, and I know Lynn will as well.
Yes,
and,
absolutely.
We appreciate it. We love you guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. And Greg, thanks for joining. And
yes,
we talked earlier.
Busy day for Mr. Greg Haas. So thank you.
A little gang of us out here in the virtual lands.
It's our paranormal family. Hello, everybody.
That's right.
Yes, it is.
It's a big family.
Yeah.
And
it is.
Guys.
Yes, and and it's so wonderful that we have each other. For so many years, I remember being a child, growing up, feeling so lost, and growing up in the 60s, and those were just things that people didn't talk about. I mean, your parents definitely, it was all about what the Joneses thought, wherever that comment came from, but they didn't want those kinds of things to get out, because you will be labeled the weirdos, and the men with white coats would come and take you away, literally.
I say all the time. My mother says that to me all the time. Couldn't tell anybody.
No.
Really, Mom, you're telling me now that you believe me, but you didn't believe me when I was a kid. No, I believed you. I just didn't want to know, have anybody else know. So I'm a weirdo kid.
Yep, absolutely. And the thing is even talking about these things when I, where I was working and things like that, the outpouring of support that came from people, just random people that you wouldn't even expect. You always had those that were holier than thou, but then you always had this group of people that would come forward and say, when I was a kid, there was a rocking chair that used to move itself into the hallway, and nobody was there, type thing. And I've never shared this with anybody before in my life, but I feel that I can tell you. So they come forward with these stories and they want to share. They want that validation as well. But the thing is too, there were a couple of times that I was in rooms with patients where the transitioning person was talking about children that had not come in yet. And I had this lady who was passing, and her daughter was an only child. She had never been married. So, but the mother, and I'm hearing this conversation, the mother's saying, there's a little boy here calling me grandma. And Susan pipes up and she says, well, I'm an only child and I've never been married and I don't have a boyfriend and I'm in menopause. So I don't know why you'd have a little boy here calling you grandma. And she said, yes, there's a little boy here calling me grandma and he looks just like you. And she just kind of shook her head and thought that she was talking crazy because she was transitioning. But lo and behold, Susan actually went to the break room at one point and met this gentleman whose wife had passed. And they built up a rapport and kind of supported each other for about a year. And then he finally asked her out and they got married 6 months later. And Susan's 51 at this point. And after they were married about 4 months, she started feeling sick and she went to the doctor. And of course, pregnancy was the last thing she ever imagined it could be. And she was pregnant and she did have a little healthy boy. So it did look like her. And, and if I may continue, there was a second story too, where there was this lady and her aunt, and the aunt was saying to this woman, she's like, when are you going to have those baby girls? I want to see those baby girls before I go home to Jesus. And her niece speaks up and she says, Aunt Emma, she said, I've been trying for 25 years to have children. I'm in menopause. I have never been able to have children. And she says, no, you have one in each arm. I see you with one in each arm. These are your babies. These are your little girls and they look a lot like you. Well, then her aunt passed away. And about 6 months later, this woman's uncle is now on my unit and I see her walk in with a baby bump. And I'm like, I'm like, you're a baby bump. And she says, yeah. She says, I'm pregnant with identical twin girls. She said, when my aunt passed away, I was already pregnant, very early pregnant, did not know it. And the thing that was wonderful is her uncle was on my unit. Then there was another relative on my unit. So I got to see her bringing these little girls in. I got to see them when they were born, when they were toddling, up until they were about 5 years old. And the way that the aunt had described them, when I was in the room before she passed away, she said that they had ringlet type blonde, like a light colored ringlet type hair, that they had, she described them as chocolate brown eyes and dimples. And these little girls had blonde ringlet curly hair, brown eyes, and dimples. And the older that they got, they looked more and more like the mom, just like the lady said that she had seen them. So they also, when they're rallying and going back and forth, they see these things as well, which are wonderful. I mean, you can get so much information talking to somebody that's dying, and they want to talk to you, also, and to share things a lot of times. So please try not to miss out on that if ever you can. It's really a very beautiful thing. It's a very peaceful thing. It's a very loving thing. They are not alone. You will see them again. I had an elderly lady asked me, she had cancer. She had just been diagnosed, and she was setting up. She didn't want to have a wake. She wanted to have her funeral thing before she died, so that people could come and tell her nice things. And I thought that was wonderful. But she was saying to me, I never remarried again, and my husband was killed in an accident when he was 30 years old. And she said, and I'm 93. Do you think that he's going to be repulsed by my appearance? And, I had explained to her that she's going to look the same way to him as she did when he crossed over. And that also he's been with her during her journey. So he's aware of the aging, but that's not the way he sees her. So not to worry, when that time comes that she appears older in this body, her spirit doesn't appear this age. So, and she was relieved with that as well, which I thought was another nice perk that I had learned about that.
I love this.
Yes, we do.
What do you think about the idea of star or soul families, soul constellations? It's a term that we've heard.
It is all connected. It is all connected. Yes.
All under the umbrella of.
All knew each other prior to this run at life. This.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, everybody does kind of go through a process, regardless of that kind of a life review, kind of looking at, where you took detours, and eventually a lot of times you get to where you're meant to be. Sometimes people that have addictions, their life review is kind of interesting because they were stoned or drunk through the whole thing, and they can't even remember their daughter's wedding. So they've missed a lot. That's kind of a wasted life in that sense, because they're not living it. But you do go through a review. I call it a life review. There is a spirit with you when you go through that life review. They can be angelic or like that beautiful. I believe that beautiful being that was there that I saw with my mother was someone from a different solar system or being that way, because they all do connect. But the thing is when my mom had mentioned after the life review, you also go through the cubbies of reviewing the areas that you did, and a lot of times too, if you go through your life review and there are things that you didn't do so well on, you are schooled on that. Or like, let's say for instance, somebody that's committed suicide, there's a difference between a natural death, which is what most of us have, sudden death, as well as a near-death experience. So all of those are handled differently over there, because if somebody were to have a sudden death, to have the whole party with hundreds of people coming on all of a sudden while they're still bargaining with God for one more moment to breathe would be a little overwhelming. They do get it. However, they have to go through a period of understanding that they've died and having that acceptance and kind of go through the stages of grieving. But I kind of got off the track with the one question that you had asked me. I'm sorry.
That's okay. We were talking about star
We
families.
love this.
Yes. So when you go through all of that, we do have houses on the other side. A lot of times artwork and things, if you're an artsy fartsy kind of person and you paint or sculpt, you can envision those things of what they're going to look like before you even start painting them, because they are things that we've already done and they're in our homes on the other side. However, there are areas that you stay in. However, you don't stay in what you would call heaven. Once you've gone through all of those things, heaven almost turns into like an airport with terminals, and you are going off into the multiple directions that you need to go in. And it also, they talk about the different lives paralleling one another. A lot of times people, when they're in dream states, they have dreams that are very, very real, because sometimes, as I've had it explained to me with my father, who had a near-death experience, and also to my mother, you can be in 6 places at one time once you cross over. Now, that means that you can be at the dinner table with your brother while you're in the car with your sister driving to work, and your mother, taking her nap. You can be in all of those places, but also on the other side, you can be equally in 6 places at one time. So you might be in a different solar system as a pilot, super pilot or Superman shooting things down. You never know, whatever your path has been chosen for that. And a lot of the dreams that you have are very, very real. It's because you kind of go through that veil a little bit that way. And this is part of the book that I'm going to be writing, and the one that comes out after Colors of Heaven, that connects with Colors of Heaven, detailing that a little bit more. I kind of went more on the death and dying part with Colors of Heaven, because I've got to get the people's mindset needs to have a better understanding of how that works before we kind of go into the stuff that our spiritual families are more comfortable with talking about, if that makes sense. So there will be a sequel to Colors of Heaven, Beginnings Never End, as there's also a 3rd book that I'm working on in the Omnipresent series called 111 Becky Don Drive, that will go into a 5-part book series. But, all of these things are so important, but they have to be done in stages so that people are more open to learning about them. And that's what part of this is. People are seeking. So you want to give them enough that it doesn't overwhelm them, so that they can continue to grow and their light can continue to advance and
Flourish.
and flourish. Thank you for that word.
More whole.
Yes,
so
indeed.
like, is this kind of the point of this run, if you will, to become more whole? I mean, everybody says life is just lessons, and you got to learn these lessons.
Well, the life
be
here
an easier
is
way, right?
Yeah, no, the life here is, this is the worst, but you get the most credit for being here. And as a matter of fact, when we cross over from here, we're seen as heroes for coming here, because this is a hellhole. Literally, I mean, it's not easy being here at all. So we are. And the thing is, too, is because time on the other side is so different than it is here. It's really timeless. My mom kind of tried to put it into terms that we could understand, even though it's not similar to here. She said, if you wanted to count a day, it's almost as long as like 20 some odd years would seem here. She said, but really it's timeless. And I don't know how to explain it in the way that she explained it to me, but it makes sense without putting those boundaries on it of a day with a night kind of thing. But she said, on the other side, when we leave to come here, it's like we're going on vacation for what would be like to us similar to somebody going on vacation for a couple of days or a week, and then we're back, so they don't have to, and they can see, where we are. They know where we are. They can come and be with us whenever they want to. But for us, this time thing is, life is so important, and time is so important, and everything's regimented and scheduled and all of those sorts of things because it matters here.
Yes.
Yeah. So it makes it harder here. And of course, our belief systems as well, what we've had drilled into us from children of what's appropriate behavior, what to believe. I mean, even the government's telling us things that we can and can't do, even though we're supposed to have freedom for these things. So you're molded by your environment. You're molded by your nurturing of your family. You're molded by nature also, type things. So, Earth is not pleasant. And I can tell you what, when I have my time to cross over, I will not be afraid to do it. However, dear Lord, you cannot take me before I finish raising my 13-year-old daughter. My 14-year-old daughter just turned 14. I've got to finish my job here. My other kids are grown and would be okay. But I don't want to come back here ever again.
Happy
Period.
birthday to her. And
Yes.
I got a good question here for you from George. George
Mm-hmm.
says, Lynn, is it possible to experience a life review on this side before we die?
Yes, if you're able to. Well, it's different. Through meditation, there's a place that is called, I call it the Akashic Records. Some people call it the Akashic Records, which is kind of that hallway with the cubbies. You can go to the other side and have the ability to review previous lives, future lives, and the current life that you're in. A lot of times, also in the sense of a near-death experience, they do kind of go through that life review. My father is a prime example. He had gone for a physical with his doctor. His doctor was looking at his eyes, noticed that he had a bulging vein in his eye, which is an indication of a clot. So they immediately sent him to the hospital, and he had this rapidly moving clot that was too big for them to dissolve. So they had to go in and they had to do immediately surgery on him to take the clot out of the vessel, because he would have been dead within 18 hours. They said 12 to 18 hours he was going to have a massive stroke that would have killed him because it was such a large clot. So while he was in the recovery room, the nurse he was just starting to wake up, and the nurse went to put some pain medication in his IV. And my father was not a religious man. He was a raging alcoholic. I mean, he was a very difficult man, very intelligent man, but very difficult man. And he told me that he heard this voice in his mind say, no, don't take that medication. So he verbalized to the nurse, no, I don't want that. But it was too late, because she had already did the IV push. She had already pushed it through, and it was morphine. And he said that everything went black, that he started to float in this tunnel that was like glistening gold stars all around it. It's how I also found out that you can be in 6 different places at one time, which then was also validated by other people who had near-death experiences, as well as my mother being on the other side. But he was talking about, and I'll share, I'm getting to a point with this story, but he was talking about being individually with each of his children. He has 6 children. My sister was deceased. On the other side, he did get to see her, but he was with each one of us and his new wife that he had just married from Russia. So he actually, when he came back, told me about the shirt that I had on, and I was living in a different state. And he was right. It was my favorite shirt. It had pastel stripes on it. And he identified that. But anyway, he had a life review at that point, and he was made to look back at a lot. He didn't get to go through the whole life review. He got to go through a portion of it where he had to look back at all of the damage that he did with his drinking and the behavior that how he had hurt people again and again. And when he came back, he was a completely different person. He immediately stopped drinking, and he became this very, very humble, very dear man. And he apologized, individually to each of us, and said, I have not been the best parent, and I am so sorry. I did the best I could with what I knew, but I loved you, and I'm sorry for anything that I caused. And he was able to make amends. But he did talk about being shown that, and that's what compelled him to come forward and make it right before he finally passed away at like 93 years old.
Wow.
So,
Wow, it was a long life. Wow.
Maybe there are 12 steps on that stairway to heaven.
Oh,
you never. Well, let me tell you, the thing is that, again, we're talking, we talk about souls that have crossed over and souls that don't. Souls that don't cross over, when they show up, they still have their cause of death that's apparent. They still have their addiction issues. They still have mental illness. All of those things that they kind of, that they had here don't go away. They have to kind of cross through that barrier to the other side, which then allows them to come and back and forth. But there are a lot of them. The only thing that stops you from going to the other side is yourself. You have the right to choose whether you want to cross over or not. There are a lot of them that do choose not to cross over. I have kind of a comical example. If you'd like me to share it, I'd be happy to.
Sure.
Okay, I have this gentleman that I call Dapper Dan. Dapper Dan, I was working in a facility. I had my med card in front of this lady's room who was actively passing. And where I was seated, there was this sitting room with pillars. And I see this man peering out from the side of the pillar. And I knew it was a ghost. And I said to him, I said, hello. And he's kind of looking over his shoulder to see who I'm talking to, because nobody's probably talked to this man in 100 years. So I said, no, you there. Why are you here? Why haven't you crossed over? And he started to come forward towards my cart, and he was still off to the side. And he was a handsome man. I mean, he looked to be maybe 35, but maybe a little bit older than that. He was dressed well. He didn't look like he was upper echelon, but definitely upper middle class with what he had on. It looked like the 1800s kind of thing. He had the appearance of like this Swiss cheese area to his abdomen that to me indicates that he died of something corrosive like cancer or cirrhosis of the liver. And I asked him, I said, well, this lady here is getting, why haven't you crossed over? This lady here is getting ready to cross over and her family's here. I can hook you up, which you don't have to do that. But the thing is I wanted to let him know that if he wanted to cross over with some angels, that he could kind of, work himself in with this group. And he told me he had a very, very heavy Irish brogue. And he said to me, "Milady, I can't cross over." And I said, "Well, of course you can. Why can't you cross over?" And he said, "My wife and my mistress are on the other side, and neither one knew about the other." So this whole time, this man has kept himself earthbound because he didn't want to have to cross over and face his wife and his mistress, who now obviously know, type thing. And I even told him at that point, I said, look, I said, the cat's out of the bag. I said, and emotions on the other side are different than they are here. There's a lot of forgiveness. There's not that jealousy or that anger or that animosity. I said, and not only that, your girlfriend and your wife may not even be there. They might even be on a different solar system somewhere in their third life while you're still
plane.
Yeah, while you're
together or something.
Right?
Yeah. They might even be buried. You never know. So it's like, and you're still here. And I told him, I said, there aren't many people that can see you. And most people that could see you would run away screaming, and I can help you cross over if you want to go. And he just kind of smiled and faded away. And I never saw him again. Of course, that was the first time that I saw him. But people, a lot of times they choose not to cross over, maybe because they're caring for a loved one, and then they end up crossing before the loved one does. So they kind of hover to watch over, and then the loved one crosses over and they get stuck here. Those are the sad cases. Then there are the rebellious, cantankerous ones that are hardcore alcoholics, that are the ones that are literally standing around people in bars trying to get a whiff of their drink because they still have their senses. Yeah. And those... Yeah. If you've got a porn addiction, you think you've got your moment alone in that little peep show, you would be shocked at how many perverts you have standing in there with you watching. Yeah. So you may want to charge admission with what you're doing in there.
Is there ectoplasm on your shoulder? You're just happy to see me.
All right.
Right? Yeah, you think you had that moment smoking your... If people could see what I sometimes see and what other people who have the ability to see when you're on your cigarette break at work, how many dead souls are standing around you just trying to get a whiff of those fumes, you wouldn't want to smoke anymore. Some of them don't have heads. So especially because they have, like I said, their cause of death, shows. I I went into a bar one time. It was a sports bar with some friends, and there was literally a spirit standing next to this couple that were getting romantic at the bar, and they both had their drinks there. And if they could have seen this one spirit, there were multiple ones, but this one in particular had his head sitting on the bar right next to the drink, and his nose was like going up and down trying to sniff in the fumes, and the body standing there kind of holding the head. It was gruesome. And it's like, if that lady and man could see that, they would wet their pants and run out of the room. But this is what happens. And a lot of times, you can offer them, hey, listen, do you want to cross over? No, I'm good. They want to stay. They want to hang out in that bar. They want to hang out in the peep show. They want to hang out at the horse races, just because that's something that they already did. But don't think you've got that private moment, because you don't.
So you're saying this is probably a cause for why so many saloons and taverns are haunted, right? If you're into
yeah, definitely.
Really good.
Definitely, yes.
Pornhub might be haunted as well, so you don't know what you're inviting in by clicking that link, right?
Okay.
Yeah. And the thing about,
I'm going to bring a couple more up. I'm sorry.
And the thing
you had a couple here I did want to get.
No,
to.
this is great.
Okay.
Jack Kilowatt.
Sorry.
I think so speaking of life review, are we talking about a Bardo type experience, an Egyptian scale of white black stones, or a metaphor that lies in the spiritual realm and outside of major religions, meaning no religion involved? Only says
no religion involved. It's more like the metaphor kind of thing than and I guess also, depending on what your belief system is, they kind of present it to you the way that you would understand it better. So I guess the Egyptian thing could be in there too. I don't know for sure about that, but it is. Are you guys with me?
We are.
No, we're with you. We're looking for questions. There's a question out here as well.
There's a bunch.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
lots of them.
So as far as that go, what I understand is what I'm telling you, but I do know that there can be some differences. Again, like there are star seeds, there are other ways that things are handled, and again, it's your belief system too. What you believe. Like for instance, the Jehovah's Witnesses believe that when they die, they just go to sleep, and that they're going to be awakened someday in this new order, that they're the only ones there and nobody else is. But then they pass away and they're not sleeping, and they're walking around with people, greeting people, so it's different for everybody. I think that there is some some of it is the way that you also believe that it is going to be for you. And I have also seen aliens. So I have personally seen aliens as well. So
when you
it's not
define
just
aliens, how do you personally define those aliens?
All right. I had a patient. This is in book number 2. I had a patient at the end of my hallway. And again, in this facility that I worked in the same hallway for all of those years, this lady, the thing that I've noticed about a lot of the people that have embodied, that are aliens embodied in human form, is that they don't have children. Especially if they're female. The males sometimes do, the females usually don't. But she had eyes like a wild-eyed rabbit. I mean, her eyes were like really, really wide open. And because she had them so, I mean, almost bulging, but it wasn't like Graves' disease. They were naturally that way, just these big, wide-eyed opened eyes. But what happened is again, I worked the night shift. And of course, most things happen on the night shift. Or maybe it's not that most things happen on the night shift. It's just that you notice them more because everything else is calmer.
Quieter.
Yeah, exactly. So I was called down. She rang her bell. She wanted her nighttime pain medicine and her sleeping pills. So I was going down to her room, and when I walked into the room, I had my blood pressure cuff with me for one thing, because one of the medications was a heart medication, and I had to check her blood pressure before I could give it to her. And I had just charged this machine, and it was good to go. But I walked into the room, and she's laying on her side, facing the door. And in the room, there were these 3 beings, all of them identical outfit, but they were like between a dimension, like they were behind a veil, but I could see them moving around. And it was almost like they were walking behind this woman, plugging and unplugging and replugging, and kind of like those old time switchboard operators that are plugging and pulling things and putting them.
They were used to do,
yes,
My mom was one.
they were literally doing that on this woman. And they didn't care that I was in the room. I don't think they realized that I could see them. And she's laying there and I'm walking over. But this didn't just happen once. And the thing was too, is that when I went into the room, my fully charged blood pressure machine died. So I had to call out into the hallway to have a CNA bring me another one. And when they brought me that other one, it died. So I had to ask for a manual blood pressure cuff, and I took it that way. And those things were still in there. So I didn't say anything at first because I thought, well, what was that? And like I said, there was something over their faces. They were all, I think that they were like, not drones, but what do they call those robotic, not robotic, but there's a word for them that they can send to do their work for them remotely. I can't think of the word right now. I probably will think of it. But this wasn't the first. This was the first time, but it wasn't the last time that I saw in that patient rooms only. I had 24 rooms. That person's room only. I saw several different times at different times in the month where I would go in there and those things would be in there. And again, they were always. The second time that I went in there, as a matter of fact, there were like 5 of them. And out of the 5 of them, there was one that was taller and slender, and all the rest of them were the identical height. And the tall one actually walked around the bed where I was standing and walked right through me. And talk about a teeth itching sensation. But it was so real that I actually said to the alien, I said, "Excuse me." When he crossed through me, and the lady even made a comment. She says, "Oh no, honey, that's all right," because she thought I was saying "excuse me" to her, but I was saying "excuse me" because this thing came and just kind of went through. But I saw that on more than one occasion. I never ever saw it in anybody else's room but hers, with her. And after she passed away, I never saw them there again. So I had actually then started to investigate. And there was one other thing else about this lady that I know, that she was an empath. She was different. One particular night I was going down the hallway again to her room to take in some medication. And I felt this energy run up behind me, like somebody running up behind me. And I turned around and I went, "Boo," because I expected it to be one of the CNAs. We were having a snowball fight in the hallway. It was snowing outside. We were bored. It was midnight, so we were having a snowball fight. And so I expected it to be one of the CNAs coming up to hit me with a snowball. And I turned around and there was nothing there, but I could feel this anxious energy behind me. So when I walked into the lady's room, this is the lady that has had the several time having the aliens in her room. When I walked into her room, she said, "Who's your friend?" And I'm like, "What?" And she says, "They're very busy, aren't they?" And then all of a sudden I felt the energy leave. And she said, "Well, they just left and went out the door." So she was correct. So she was also able to see those things. And really, if you think about it, even with aliens and Bigfoot, for instance, I believe that all of those things that exist. I do believe that they are forms of aliens, or have a higher consciousness, in the sense that they're able to manipulate the veils in between the dimensions. And that's how, like, for instance, Bigfoot, being huge and smelly, can disappear in an instant after being cornered. I believe that they are able to manipulate those veils.
Quick question: when the alien walked through you, could you feel? Was it hot,
Yeah.
cold? Did
It,
tingle?
it was a tea. The only way it was energetic, but it made my teeth itch. I don't know how else to describe. Yeah, it was the weirdest. It was very quick, but it was I'm like, it just kind of, it shook me. I mean, but I can't describe it. yeah, I just, my teeth, I mean, if you can imagine your teeth being itchy, it made my teeth itchy. That's the only way that I know how to describe it. And like I said, it was so quick. So it was like in and out type thing, but I did feel it, that when they were crossing through, but of course I was looking at them too. So there was a shift of energy in that room at that time.
And you
And
definitely feel. Satones, if I'm saying that right,
Yes.
from YouTube says, at Dark Horse Paranormal Productions, can you ask how do we access the heavenly realms? So somebody who wants to access those Akashic records you mentioned earlier, what should
meditation.
Meditation's wonderful. Everybody should.
Meditation. Yes, absolutely. You get in touch with, all of us have guides. Sometimes we have certain guides that are with us through our lifetime. Some of them interchange, especially if, for instance, someone is an alcoholic or drug addict and they have crossed over. They're then placed with a person on this earth who is suffering with that addiction to help guide them. And that is part of their schooling. So sometimes the spirits, the guides are interchangeable depending on what they need to learn, because they're also learning while they're helping you. And then there are other ones that are stable, ones that are permanently always with you that you can count on to be there. But yeah, so definitely meditation and asking to be taken to these places once you finally are able to keep your mind quieted, or in the case of white noise also helps with that too, or even meditation music. So
Whatever your ears, your brain feels.
yes,
You have to experiment, and then
Yeah, and
It-
breath work
you're-
is very important too. What
Yes.
kind of meditation do you like, and what do you recommend people?
I'm sorry.
What kind of meditation do you personally like, and what do you recommend people where they start?
You know, I've been doing it for so long that when I start my meditation, within seconds I'm gone. So I usually astro project in mine, where I'm visiting with beings, and even actually was invited inside of Mount Shasta one time by a very, very beautiful being. So, but the whole idea of the meditation is to start by trying to silence your mind, and of course that in itself is thought of as something very, very difficult, because our minds are constantly, especially if you're female, because we're always multitasking. Men are more thinkers, but they're more focused. Women are more emotionally based, and our emotions kind of take over our thoughts and scramble things a little bit. So if you start out in a room, usually sitting up is good, because you might nod off if you're laying down and getting too comfortable. And you don't want, the idea is to be in between that sleeping and waking state, is kind of what meditation is. When you kind of get into that mode, you're still very aware of your surroundings. If somebody's dog is barking outside, you sometimes will hear it, that sort of thing. So it's not like you're out of your body and something's going to come and take over. You're still very, very much aware of that. Also, prayer. You need to say a prayer calling in for protection, just in case you do have any, exactly, your intention, and also to put some protection around you as well, because you are a little bit vulnerable during meditation, just as you are when you're sleeping. So it's always a good idea to have that protection and not have anything mess with you while you're doing that. But the more you do it, the easier it gets, and the more regularly. And I would recommend setting aside like 10 or 15 minutes each day just to sit quiet, where you're not talking to anybody, your phone is shut off, nobody needs you for anything. And even if you can't silence your mind at first, just sitting by yourself in the quiet, or with like some meditative music on it, like Kristen had said, you have to find what works for you. Silent noise, which would be a fan blowing, or music, or nothing type thing. And then you will gradually be able to, then to silence your mind or whatever, and believe what you're seeing. A lot of times things will kind of pop in and go out at first, and you'll doubt yourself. Don't question and doubt yourself. Just go with it and see what happens. And a lot of times too, people with meditation, when they do start to hear something or see something, they immediately become scared. So
don't be scared.
right. Yeah, this is something. Yep, exactly.
Right.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, don't be afraid.
Yeah.
I was afraid for a very long time, as people know, and if you know us, and yeah, don't be afraid. They will come to you. They may look scary, but they're probably, give you a little message or something, and they're there to protect you, to help you.
I
Yes.
find that good one, and I just told this to Reginald. I put his comment up yesterday. I think in a call we were talking about meditating and slowing the mind down a little bit because you can have so many thoughts coming from all directions, and it's very hard because there's no perfect way to do it. It is something you've got to try on your own and kind of work your way through. But like a real simple one is like kind of build a rhythm of breathing in for 4, holding your breath for 4, letting out, waiting for, then starting again like a box in a way. And that 4 count is something you're comfortable with. You don't want to be gasping.
That's a great idea.
And then start counting back in your head. You can pick any number. It can be 100 and count back to 0. It goes by much faster than you would think. It seems intimidating, like, oh, that's a lot of numbers. But it'll slow the mind down. And if you get to 0 and you're still just like really clouded, just take another random number, start counting down. 0, 39, 38. And that helps clear some of that clutter.
Yes.
So much great comments on it. So many great comments.
Go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say to our YouTube friends who are watching on YouTube, thank you so much. I really needed that laugh tonight too.
Oh, you guys are awesome.
You guys are so much fun. Thank you for joining us.
Hypnagogic states, Echo Leaf had mentioned, and I think Linda said, "Can I get my
hypnagoggles?"
Right,
yeah,
right. And you're right. And it's hypnagogic states, the thing we
yes.
talk about a lot, because that's what you're getting yourself into. It's very similar to hypnosis, right? You're getting yourself it's an alpha state, if I'm not mistaken, and you're getting in that kind of in between area between waking and sleeping, opening yourself up, hopefully not to anything too scary.
Well, and like you said also, Chris, there was something that was very important when you were talking about what you discussed with Reginald, is even they talk about that breathing in, holding it, and then letting it out. That is a stress reliever in itself, just mentally, even if you're not meditating. So it is a relaxation technique that is a really great idea for people when they're starting out. And once you first get that moment, you're going to have that, oh, that happened. And of course, you're going to come back out. That's okay. But then the next time you go in, when it happens again, continue to move forward. So,
Absolutely.
And not only that, silencing your mind. Etherically, my mother has said this, it helps to prevent brain cancer because of all of that tension that's constantly going through when you're thinking too much or overthinking things. So it is important to give your brain a rest.
You think this is the pathway to the paranormal, if you will, to mediumship and other things? Quieting the mind and see what happens, see what comes in. I love that. Echo Lee says journal.
Yes.
Anne Marie Young says long car rides, vacuuming, weeding, Anne Marie?
Yes, because
gardening, yes.
That helps.
Coloring,
yes,
all kinds of different ways. Yes. So, fantastic. Where can people find you? What's the best place? I know I've got it scrolling on the screen, but it will be a podcast and people won't be able to see that.
That's okay. Everything is through www.lynnmonet.com. You can also reach out to Chris and Kristen. They have my information as well. My first book, Omnipresent, is everywhere. It's on Amazon. It's Barnes & Noble. I'm sorry, my nose is itching. It's everywhere. However, I'm going to be honest. Amazon has basically stolen that book. As of June of last year, not this year, but last year, they sold 68,031 books and paid me $525. Right now, I haven't received anything from them since June. I do know that my book has opened in India and Australia, so it's all over the world. And of course, I'm not receiving anything from that. So I will no longer be selling my books through, well, I take that back. There is one more that I'm going to put on Amazon, but it's not paranormal related. It's teenage related body odors. So that one I will put out on a therapist asked me to write it. I will put it out so that kids that need it can get it. But,
awesome.
Yeah, but the rest of them that are spiritually based, that are talking about the things that bring us all together, will be sold only through my website, www.lynnmonet.com. They could be paid through PayPal. There's also a GoDaddy option, which is who my web people are. But and also, that you can reach out to me. I can be reached through my website if you have any questions. I'm still answering my own emails at this point. I still, have to work a job and all those kinds of things. So, yeah, I'm just a normal person and struggling like everybody else to get through this lifetime. So I hope that what I've shared with you answers some questions. I hope that it brings some peace of mind. Also, to people that are actively maybe losing someone or has been with terminal illness. There is no wrong decision if you are put into a position where, let's say you have someone that's on life support or something like that. There is no wrong decision to make, because a lot of the things were prearranged before the person, before the person's lifetime. So if, a lot of times people have that decision to make and they're like, what is the right thing to do? Am I going to be killing this person? No, you're going to be letting them take the course that they chose for themselves. And it's a very loving, selfless act. And that's another thing too. On the other side, those selfless, kind acts of love are what matter the most. You can go through life and say, oh, gee, I pay my taxes. I don't speed. I'm a good person. That's not exactly the right kind of selfless, loving act. It's those acts of helping an elderly person mow their grass because they can't afford to pay somebody, and they can't, from the heart, or tipping that pizza lady $20 extra that you didn't have to, and she's able to pay her water bill. When you get on the other side, in your life review, all of those good things that you've done come back to you, and you get to feel that feel good. And I bring this up because I think it definitely brings this home and explains it. And then I'm going to stop here. But Danny and Brinkley, who we've all heard of, who had been hit by lightning and has written several stories of multiple death experiences that he's had back and forth, talked about his most recent near-death experience. And when he came back, he started hugging a lot of people, and people started to notice this, and they started to make mention of the fact of, wow, you're really become a hugger. You're hugging people a lot. And he said, I'm not hugging you, I'm hugging me, because when I get onto the other side, when I cross over onto the other side, all of these hugs that I've given, I get to feel all of that good feeling coming back for me. And so, that is the reason for doing it. It is those selfless, from the heart, kind acts of love that you do for people that really, really count on the other side.
That is beautiful.
It's wonderful.
I know Carol had asked you if you gave classes. I don't think you currently are, but is that something you would consider?
Yes, as a matter of fact, Chris and Kristen and I have been talking about a podcast for me. They've been very, very wonderful to offer to assist me with that. We are going to be talking more seriously about that coming up. I do plan on doing some classes. I am going to be doing some podcasts on YouTube to help people with those sorts of things, and also to give people a chance to ask questions. And I'm also going to have Chris and Kristen on my show, and Greg and Reggie and Ann and everybody, all of my little family.
You called out, Ann.
Yeah. I what?
I said Ann was called out. Anne Marie on
your paranormal
Busted.
family.
Oh, Anne Marie, yes. Yeah. Most of my human family, out of 6 of us, all of us are deceased except for 2 of us. I have a sister and myself that are remaining, and so I've adopted Chris and Kristen as my family, as well as our group that we have. And yeah, I feel very, very lucky to have all of them in my life. So,
and we are very lucky to have all of you guys as well.
Yeah, we love all you.
We do.
Seriously, like, we know you aside of the podcast now because we've been talking so long, for a few
years. Yes, we're good friends.
You're really down to earth, and you're the real deal, and that's why we just love having you on our show. So thank you so much.
You like me because I have a potty mouth.
Yes.
I've been known to have a potty mouth with
Yes.
time or two.
We are funny.
It's funny. It's all in fun. It's not vulgar. It's just funny
No,
stuff.
it's just
Yeah, of course it is.
funny, and we
Of
all
course it
need to
is.
laugh. Laughter is the best medicine. It really is, because thank
Especially-
you
Yep,
for everybody tonight doing that.
Echo
Yep.
Leaf says he's joining the family. You're very welcome to.
Thank you.
Robert Honings, thank you to you both.
Please tell Bridget we said hello.
Absolutely. And Linda Judd, thank you. Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much.
Linda.
And it's just been wonderful. And thank you for being
Thank
patient
you.
with the things that happened earlier today.
Yes.
This has been great. And hopefully, the right people will hear it and it will make a difference. And we so appreciate your time. We'll talk-
One more thing. I did the Colors of Heaven was released last Sunday and can be gotten in ebook off of my website. So get it quick. It will be coming out in paperback, but to be honest, I have to sell enough of my ebooks in order to print them in paperback since I'm not using Amazon. I have to be able to do that. So I'm hoping within the next 2 months, the paperback will be coming out as well. So please get the ebook.
Excellent.
Excellent.
And
Yes.
you'll probably be able to get a signed edition if you do things right.
Yes, as a matter of fact, if you buy the
On there.
since you are all listening to this as a perk, and I'm also going to offer this as donation when we have that charity raising thing. If you purchase the ebook and you flag me, I will put you down. And when the book does come out in paper book, I will also send you one of those for free.
Excellent.
Wow, that's wonderful.
Well,
Okay.
Wow.
that is super cool.
That's
You can't
great.
really
Thank you.
beat that.
Wow.
Yeah, signed by me. So yeah, and that's just the people in this room right now.
And that's just for you people in
And
the
we
room
know
right
who
now.
you are. Don't try
Yes.
any
That's it.
sneaky stuff.
We all
Yep.
know who you
We know
are.
who you are.
That's right. That's right. I'll go through the list and write down everybody's names. But
That's it.
definitely, when you do buy the ebook, you can send me a little note, and I'll catch it. I'll make sure that I put it in my computer and log it, and make sure that you do get that paper. And the paper book back is like $21, so it's a nice free gift.
That's wonderful. Thank you
Well, again,
so
thank you
much.
so much.
Yes.
Lynn, for your time tonight. And look
So
forward to
sorry about
talking
earlier.
soon.
but-
No, thank you for having me.
I want to thank everybody in our audience and
Yes.
whatever platform you're watching us. We saw a lot of activity on YouTube tonight, which is great
It
to
was
see.
wonderful. You guys are great on YouTube.
Facebook, as always. So thank you guys so much.
Yes. Thank
Um,
you.
We will see you guys next Thursday on the Dark Horse Paranormal Podcast. Have a good
Thank you. Thank you
day.
for having me.
We
Love you
love you
guys.
all.
Okay. Bye.
We'll see you soon.